Welcome to the Fiscally Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Matt Gardner, co-founder and CEO of Hiline. Today on the podcast, we have Mitch Stein, head of strategy at Chariot. And today we're going to drop some serious knowledge about the rise of donor-advised funds and nonprofit fundraising. Okay. Hey, Mitch, welcome to the Fiscally Awesome podcast, man. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're going to have some spirited discussion about donor-advised funds. Mitch tells me that there's $326 billion sitting in donor-advised funds right now. Money that's already been set aside for charity can only go to charity, and yet most nonprofits aren't set up to easily receive it. So Mitch is set out to help address that to the work he's doing, and I think there's a lot of synergy between Chariot and Hiline. But Mitch, let's start with, give us your background, what you've done in your career, and how you came to be at Chariot, and what you're all working on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Matt. Good to be here. Excited to talk about my favorite topic in the world, which is donor-advised funds. I started my career in investment banking. I was actually at Goldman Sachs for 7 years. During that time, got more involved volunteering and fundraising for nonprofits. Ended up leaving to try my hand at a startup that actually we originally met when I was working on called Pond, which was a marketplace between nonprofits and all different kinds of vendors that they could be working with. Ended up winding that down at the end of 2022. And around that time, met the folks that founded Chariot. And shortly thereafter, joined their efforts, very focused on donor-advised funds and just more complex payments in general to nonprofits, how to make sure that money is flowing, more of it moving more seamlessly and being put to good work in an easier fashion. And so we've just grown and expanded from there. And now we serve both nonprofits on the fundraising side, how they can raise more money from donor-advised fund donors in an easier fashion, but also on the gift processing side, how they handle the more complex gift sources like workplace giving and donor-advised funds and QCDs or mailed checks, how we can streamline all that manual work and make sure they're spending their time moving their mission forward, not pushing paper and doing a lot of data entry.
Right.
And then the last piece is actually supporting the grant makers themselves, the actual DAF sponsors, or any place that's sending a high volume of payments to nonprofits. We also facilitate the delivery of their grant payments through the Chariot platform.
I mean, doing a lot of good work. So to focus on donor-advised funds, help, for those who don't know what a donor-advised fund is, give us the very basic layman's explanation for how it works.
Yeah, so a donor-advised fund is a tax-advantaged charitable savings account. You can think about it like a 401k is for your retirement, or an HSA is to your healthcare expenses. A DAF is that for your giving, for your philanthropy. And it's quite simple. You put funds or assets like securities into an account, you contribute those as a donation, and that's how it's treated on your taxes that year when you make the contribution. So you get the full write-off on whatever you've put into your donor-advised fund account, and you get that because it's irrevocable. So the only thing you can do with that money after it has been placed into a DAF account is make donations to qualified charities. And so that has a really powerful impact on people's giving. Once you set money aside that you have pre-committed to philanthropy, any time that you are inspired to give, you are faster, there's less friction to actually make those donations and make larger ones. And it forces you to take a step back and say, oh, I've set this money aside for giving. What do I want to do with that? What are my goals? And it leads to people being a lot more intentional with their giving, in addition to having these tax advantages of utilizing this structure to do larger or more strategic contributions at a single point in time into that account, and then make grants out of it over time. And the money that's in that account can be invested in the market. So it's growing with the market while it is in there until you're making your grants.
So the DAF is a pretty interesting tax strategy, probably high net worth individuals. Like, how much of the DAF dollars do you think is coming from high net worth individuals who are setting money aside over time and waiting for the right moment to give?
Yeah, the best data we have, I think, on this front, Fidelity Charitable is the largest DAF sponsor in the country. They have several thousand people that utilize it's just shy of 400,000 people utilizing Fidelity Charitable accounts. And their median account size is a little over
Wow.
$25,000.
Okay. So you got everybody doing this, all shapes and sizes.
Yeah, so that's definitely the biggest misconception around donor advised funds is people think it's like this bespoke tool for the ultra wealthy doing some type of tax gymnastics. It's just not the case. It's the vast majority of people using donor advised funds yes, they are well off for sure, but it's not only mega donors. And that also varies by the DAF provider. So, for example, community foundations often have higher minimum account sizes and higher minimum grant sizes, and they really target a much larger asset size donor base because they have a more hands-on white glove approach to managing those accounts. Whereas you have newer providers like Daffy or GoFundMe even has a DAF option now where they appeal to a much wider group of the market that's just interested in more streamlined ways to manage their giving in addition to possible tax benefits.
So how fast is like the DAF market growing right now? And why do you think executive directors and nonprofit leaders should really be paying attention to it?
Yeah, the most interesting stat here is actually from some research that Chariot led with our partners over at K2D Strategies. We are now in our third year of running the DAF fundraising report, where it's the first time anyone has looked at nonprofits' own historical data related to DAF giving, as opposed to just the DAF reported data themselves. That's also valuable, but there was something really missing to understanding the impact on nonprofit fundraising and their donor base. And one of the most interesting things from that report is being able to see across a cross-section of nonprofits participating, how is DAF giving growing within their own fundraising, and how is non-DAF giving growing or changing. And in 2024, which is the last time we've published, we'll be publishing 2025 data later this spring. But in 2024, the median change in DAF giving year over year was a 30% increase among the 32 participating nonprofits, which represented a wide spectrum of different types of organization. By comparison, non-DAF giving was down 1% in that same time frame. So there are huge shifts happening in donor demographics and giving trends. We've been talking for many years in this space about declining donor participation rate. And DAFs are this huge bright spot that not only are a preferred vehicle of giving for wealthy donors, but it's also the fastest growing source of giving across the board with different donor types. And that's, for 2024 data, every DAF provider by the end of 2025 has been reporting out just record increases. The two largest sponsors out there are Fidelity Charitable and DAF Giving 360, formerly known as Schwab Charitable. DAF Giving 360 is at 10 billion a year in annual grants. Fidelity Charitable is over 18 billion, and they're growing between 20 and 30% a year at that scale. So it is just, you can't ignore it. This is fundamentally changing the way people give and is the most promising source of growth across your revenue picture as an organization.
That's so interesting. Do you have any data on the average size gift coming from a DAF versus maybe more traditional sources? How do they differ?
Yeah. So in the same report, the average size gift varies year to year and depends on the organization, but overall, I want to say it was around $4,000. Now, averages within research are often skewed, but I think what's important is that the medians are around $500. That actually was just disclosed by DAF Giving 360 for their 2025 year in review, is that their median gift size was $500. And what we found is that 69% of the DAF gifts made in that study, over 400,000 of them, were below $1,000. So it just goes to show how much activity there is up and down the donor spectrum. So while, yes, this is exciting because averages are high and that these gifts tend to be larger, but also people want to use their DAF in all moments of giving. And so, yes, they want to use their DAF in, the big year-end donation that they make or their board commitment, but they also want to use their DAF when their friend is running the marathon or their kid's friend is doing a dance marathon at their college. Like, people want to be using their DAF wherever possible because they already set this money aside, right? I always have a preference to use this money that is restricted to that purpose, that is the cheaper, right? It's the cheaper way for me to give versus putting it on my credit card this month.
Yeah.
And so that's the mindset shift that I think is really important for people when it comes to like gift size and moments of giving, is that these people want to use their DAF as often as possible, but there's so many instances where people have a DAF and they don't use it. And that's where I think the fundraisers have the most agency and nonprofit leaders have the most agency. And that's what's worth examining from your strategy of how do you get more DAF support.
Why do you think there's still friction there? Why do you think nonprofits think about it less as part of their core strategy, more of an edge case?
I guess to me, those are two separate, kind of two questions in there. So I'll answer the second one first, which is why people think about it like an edge case on the nonprofit side. I think the single biggest reason is they don't have a handle on their own data. So if they aren't tracking this giving type in a consistent way, then of course it sounds like an edge case because they don't even know what the volume is and how that's changing over time. So how can you make strategic decisions if you don't have a handle on that? I think that is the single biggest opportunity for nonprofits to focus on, especially if they're new to this area, is making sure you have clearly defined rules and an understanding on your team of how to track donor advised fund gifts, what they are, how you filter for them in your CRM, all those questions.
So I want to just acknowledge, I agree 100% with what you said about data. While we focus on financial operations, inherently, that's also data. But I find that finance data, absent really good data about where your dollars are coming from your donors, is only so useful. It's no different than many for-profit companies. Even the CRMs, there's just not a great system in place to make sure that your data is dialed and you can use it for the greater goods. I agree with you 100%. It's a big problem to be solved.
For sure. And we've had to get really hands-on and in the weeds with this for the DAF fundraising report, because I think before we started the research, we were like, why has no one analyzed nonprofit data on DAFs? What a big gap in the market and the industry. And then we got started and we're like, oh, we know why. Really hard. And the data's a mess. And so we've been really hands-on with the participants to help them establish rules, issue spot. And that's been awesome because we've gotten to report all those findings out in this research and share with people, here's what great data governance looks like when it comes to DAF giving and simple ways for them to action that. So I just highly encourage people to reference those resources. And then the first piece you asked about on the friction side, this is where I think nonprofits not understanding or appreciating or prioritizing that friction is because very few of them as fundraisers have their own DAF account. And that is such a powerful asset for anyone in the nonprofit world. Look, as you see this method of giving transforming philanthropy, why not experience it firsthand for yourself? We often call this dog fooding in the technology space, like eating your own dog food. I just recommend that every single person working in a nonprofit, there's no barrier to open a DAF. You can open a DAF at Daffy for $20. There is just no minimum to set it up, understand how it works, make a donation, see what those pain points are like, see what sort of stewardship you get. It will be so eye-opening for you. And I mentioned Daffy, there's over 1,000 donor advised funds. So you can pick one that makes sense for you. I don't work there, but they are partners of ours and certainly offer a good product. So I just feel really strongly that nonprofits would be better plugged in and tuned in to the friction points if they experience it firsthand.
So are you saying, hey, if you're an executive director or if you're in corporate development, go open up your own personal DAF and understand what it's like as the giver for what that looks like and how the giving motion works? Is that what you're suggesting?
Correct.
Yeah.
And everyone, I don't limit it to fundraising or leadership. There's no barrier. And I mean, anyone who works in a nonprofit makes at least one donation a year. It's $10. And I think everyone in your organization would benefit from experiencing that.
So I have a question that was a leading question. So the giving activity and the interest in DAFs from the giver donor side is going up. The activity is also going up in receiving DAFs, but it seems like not at the same proportion. Like more people are using DAFs as a vehicle for giving. The organizations have not been able to fully realize the opportunity yet. Is that because the platforms, the DAFs themselves, have made it easy for the next generation to understand how to use it, to invest their dollars behind, and then also use it to give? Is it because it's a platform thing? Like they've made it easy for people to do, but the nonprofits haven't made it easy to receive yet? If that question makes sense. Am I on the right track here? Or is it something different?
Yeah, I guess I don't view them as are so separate because yes, while the DAF platforms have gotten easier to use, just functionally, if you think about what a DAF is and how it works relative to how nonprofits fundraise, like they rely upon, in general, their message reaching a donor and then being inspired and making a gift as quickly in as few steps as possible. But what happens with a donor advised fund is you receive that email, you get that phone call, you're at the event, you raise that paddle, your friend asks you to donate to their birthday or their fundraiser, you see that ad about the crisis response, any of those moments. The nonprofit is set up to drive you to their donation page or drive you to what the mail return item, drive you to the CTA to make your gift. But the CTA for a DAF holder is off platform. So the nonprofit loses control. So I just don't want the framing of this to be like nonprofits doing something terribly wrong. There's a fundamental challenge. DAFs have these huge benefits of making people more apt to be generous and setting more money aside that's irrevocably committed to philanthropy. That's awesome. The challenge comes in with how you actually make those donations. So when I get that moment of inspiration, I have to pause, leave your website or anything else, go log into my computer because most DAFs don't even have a mobile experience. I need to then log in to a bank account, more or less, navigate to look up an organization, but heads up, nonprofits all have similar names. And often their marketing name is different from their actual legal name at the IRS. So I'm the donor, like, okay, wait, is that the right thing? Or maybe the fundraiser I'm at has an event name, but I don't even know what the nonprofit's name is. And it's all these things that you don't think about when you're checking out a donation form. So I'm going to go back to their website or go ask someone, what is the EIN? Because that's the unique thing that I can plug in and search by. So I get that in there. I'm going to answer several more questions. I'm going to hit submit probably after a few minutes end to end. And then I'm going to most often never hear from the organization. If anything, I typically get something in the mail, maybe a month or two later as a thank you. And so that whole process introduces so many points of friction where you're going to lose someone. And if you're not tracking the data correctly, it's really hard to steward these folks. And the data that gets sent by the DAF is often quite limited. So there's just flashpoints along that whole process.
What does that look like when the nonprofit receives your donation? What do they get from the DAF?
Yeah, so the donor has control over what they share. It is at most their name and mailing address for the vast majority of DAF gifts. Often, though, they have the option to not disclose their address, and often they'll just share a fund name, which could be something useful, like the Mitch Stein Fund, or it could be the Turtle Memorial Fund was an example of one of my friends shared a name. And you have nothing to go on. You have no idea who that person is. It's not anonymous, but it's not actionable. And then you also can get anonymous gifts. That's typically about 5% of donations. So it's not that many that are fully anonymous. But to a nonprofit with a fund name that doesn't give you any direction, it's as good as an anonymous gift.
Yep.
So those things are challenges. And it's a big reason why Chariot's work to incorporate DAF giving into those online donation experiences has been so well received by the donors in nonprofits, because the donor then doesn't have to overthink it. They can just check out with their donor advised funds as a payment option without leaving the page. And we automatically collect their name and email right there, so that you can thank them right away. You can properly track their donor record. And most importantly, you identified that they have a DAF. You now can do more research on them, steward them like a major donor, and make sure they're in the right pipeline. Whereas without that, they might have just made the $100 credit card gift on that form because they didn't want to go through all that rigmarole with their DAF portal.
Love that. So Chariot and Hiline are like two sides of the same coin. So you're helping nonprofits capture and process DAF gifts at the front door. And we are focused on helping just put the back office on skates and make sure that all of the record keeping and the data is being captured and processed in a way that the organization can use it for greater good. So when you do both of those things really well together, like, what does that look like in your mind? If you could just architect the perfect solution for every nonprofit.
Yeah, so this is something that in the evolution of Chariot as well has been cool to watch, because we started off introducing this DAF payment option, which people were really excited about, especially in those kind of peer-to-peer, time-bound fundraising moment, giving days, events, etc. So super excited, more DAF gifts, more contact information. That's all great. But we continue to hear, particularly from anyone on the operations and gift processing side of the house, that like, okay, more DAF gifts, yay, but actually the process we used to go through to process and handle inbound revenue from these sources is a total mess. It comes in different structures, different channel, different portals for every single DAF provider, including workplace giving platforms, which are technically DAFs, but very different demographics. And so we were actually making that operational problem in some ways by increasing the volume of DAF giving harder. We provided more data, which was helpful in the process, but it wasn't meaningfully solving this gift processing issue at scale. So we introduced a new part of our platform in January of this year called the gift processing platform, where you can now direct those payments from donor advised funds or workplace giving platforms into your Chariot account and the data related to those gifts, so that they're automatically reconciled. You can set rules and policies of how you like to code them, and then have them sync to your CRM and accounting system seamlessly. So I give a little bit of that product background as a setup to say that what we've been able to observe now that people are automating that throughput is not only is it saving a tremendous amount of time for teams and just creating bandwidth, but it's letting them do things that they just fundamentally didn't do before. So we can automatically create a donor record for the Turtle Memorial Fund, whereas previously the team just wouldn't have recorded that. It would have probably been captured as anonymous. And you might get some information in the future about that donor, and you want to have a record for that $50,000 gift in hopes that you find out more in the future. That's a really clear value prop to me. Another one is the fact that in the workplace giving example, where the data was so messy, you get these files from Benevity was the one example that a client shared, where it'd be thousands of line items a month that they actually just dumped into the Benevity donor record in their CRM. And they're just like, we don't have the time. It's not worth it. We're not going to go through all those individual donors. Now, because it's automated, they are able to capture each of those individual donor records. And they estimate that about 600 to 800 of them a month come with an email that they weren't actioning before. So now they're actually properly storing the data and have information to action on. So it's really turning that operational sinkhole into a strategic strength, which is where I think the differentiation is for nonprofits right now.
100%. So you're basically talking about channel attribution, right? So you now have attribution for how much of my gift giving is coming through a DAF and my relationship with Chariot. There's going to be many other channels where there's not great solutions for to get that data right, but it's about creating a durable revenue stream. And if you have the data, you can start to do outreach. You can start to ask for more, or can keep your donors up to speed on what's going on with the organization. How are you using the money? Like that flywheel helps create sustainability. And I love that you wired it all the way through, because that's exactly how it should work. And every nonprofit should have this channel as part of their core strategy.
Yeah. And the other thing when we talk about strategy, this is a great example where we've gone from peer-to-peer fundraising to gift processing to major and planned giving stewardship. It's all completely connected when it comes to donor advised funds. So it's this really interesting topic within the broader nonprofit space that really intersects everything in an organization. And it has not been managed that way historically. So historically, the most common thing I've seen at larger organizations that were paying attention to this 10, 15 years ago is that it lived in planned giving. This is a quote unquote complex giving vehicle, a fancy acronym that belongs with QCD, or like all these other more esoteric ways of giving. Now, fast forward, all the data I shared at the beginning of the conversation, that's not appropriate anymore. Every single one of your donors could be giving with a DAF in every single one of your fundraising instances. And so if you're isolating DAF's knowledge and strategy to the single part of your team, then that is not a recipe for being DAF ready across the organization. So it's great to have a champion. That champion absolutely can live within planned giving. We've seen that be effective with a lot of our clients, but they need to be plugged into and engaging with people across the organization on this topic, because everyone needs to have their brain switched to thinking about these opportunities. Like the person reviewing your direct mail item, someone should be raising the hand to say, hey, we don't mention DAFs here. We don't have a checkbox for DAFs. We don't include a QR code to our fundraising page where DAF pay is an option. Those are things that our clients are seeing and having really breakout success by better educating and empowering people across the organization on this topic.
Yep. I think that's really well said. So I have one last question on this. What donor management databases does Chariot integrate with? What are the ones that you feel have made this easy for you to create the right record and make sure the integration's working well?
You know, I can't play favorites, Matt.
Play favorite. I'm recognizing that our nonprofit clients are generally in a range from like $1 million annual budget to probably upwards of 7 or 8 million. That's where we play. Most of them live in that size, and not all of them are fortunate enough to have the capability in-house to figure this out. And it's hard to figure it out. It takes a lot of time. And I'm just becoming more and more convinced that we may have to figure out how we can become part of that solution, because it is the most important thing. It's to creating sustainability, is understanding where your dollars are coming from, having good data to inform better decision makings, and really understanding, if I want to build a proper budget to run a program that costs X dollars, I have to have a strategy and an idea for where those dollars are going to come from. And right now it's very hard to do for many organizations. So I'm very inspired by this problem.
Yeah. And by the way, it's an important large segment. It's growing, but if you address this problem, it's helping other things that your organization do too. If you have better best practices around data entry, around DAFs, it forces your hand to think holistically on that subject. So it's just a timely and broadly helpful thing to focus on. But when it comes to the database items, like our product DAF Pay is a tool that goes into donation forms. So some people have the same database donation form provider. Some people, they're different. And so we have over 70 partners, fundraising platforms that have DAF Pay as a payment option. So I think the call to action for people is just to make sure that your existing platform, ideally your existing platform, has that available. We have integrated this, like I said, with over 70 platforms. And so it's typically driven by their customers asking for this. So that's definitely a good approach to take. But we have had clients that have said, you know what, this provider was too slow. They're not actioning this. We're going to move and use a different product that incorporates DAF Pay, and often setting up that kind of seamless integration of the data within DAF Pay to get into the CR. When it comes to your question though about database setup for DAF giving, I honestly don't have a strong preference there because I think you can figure something out with any CRM. I don't think there's something necessarily massively differentiating about how one out of the box sets up DAF giving for you or not. I think one of our partners, Neon One, did some interesting stuff around the CRM side when they implemented DAF Pay in their donation forms. But in general, the most important thing is consistency. So people talk a lot about hard credits or soft credits and, how are you supposed to track the DAF provider versus the donor name versus the fund name? The most important thing is consistency. What I see people do is they put them in different places for different gifts. And that's the hardest thing to overcome. And so I'm less focused on the specifics of anyone's CRM and more about defining the rule for your organization and following it consistently so that you can analyze it and be doing things legally.
All right. So you gave me one plug there that I'm aware of, and I've been paying attention to Neon and what they're doing, but that's awesome. And also you stole my thunder because my next question is going to be, what's the first thing that a nonprofit who's trying to engage more with DAFs, what should they do? I think I'm hearing you say, just make sure your business is set up to administer this the right way.
The very first thing you can do is make sure your EIN is visible and discoverable on your website.
Gotcha.
So I always do this at conferences. I'm like, literally open up your phone and find your EIN on your website. If it takes you more than 5 seconds, you've just lost a DAF donor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the easiest thing someone could do. It's a spectrum. I think next would certainly be checking to make sure that you have DAF Pay as an option in your fundraising platform turned on if it's available or request it. Again, that's not any lift or cost for you to implement. Beyond that, I think having a section on your website about donor advised funds is really helpful. It's good for SEO. If people are searching the word DAF with your organization name, good to be the first one that comes up, and having a specific page to direct someone that is interested in DAFs or actually using their DAF. I hear from a lot of people that are more skeptical or doubters about this whole phenomenon that they're like, someone has the DAF, like, why do I have to remind them? Don't they know? Don't they know they have it? Shouldn't they know to use it? I'm just like, they're people. It's human behavior across every possible way you can. People need to be reminded they are forgetful and they follow the path of least resistance, even when it's against their own economic interests.
Yeah. They may just put the credit card in on your website fill form because they don't want to log in to your points. Yeah.
This is happening all the time. There's research. The DAP Research Collaborative is a cool, academic based research group that does a bunch of great work in this space. And they did a donor survey where one of the questions they asked was, how do you give outside of your DAF? And 90% of people said yes. And then they asked, what are the instances when you would give outside of your DAF? And they almost all were some version of what we call inspiration-based giving, a net new organization I heard about. I was at an event. It was urgent, like a crisis response or something time-based. It was a giving day. I want to be recognized today, not a month from now. And so that just speaks volumes to where the opportunity is. And I'll call out the things you don't need to worry about, because I think people get sent down rabbit holes because there are other people in the industry that'll say, oh, the secret to raising more from donor advised fund is you just need to build a relationship with the DAF sponsor, and then they'll recommend your organization to their fund holders. It's just not how it works for the vast majority of nonprofits. I mean, if you're one of our clients is the International Rescue Committee. They have a full-time person whose entire job is their DAF strategy. And that person has built relationships at some of these larger DAFs, and they are also in crisis response, which is a time that DAFs will make shortlisted recommendations around ways you can help when there's a hurricane, when there's some type of humanitarian disaster. So there's a specific use case for that. But by and large, the vast majority of organizations, especially your clients, Matt, they could spend
You can't do that.
$1 million, they can spend years being like, oh, I'll just become friends with someone at Fidelity, and then they'll recommend us to their client. And the reality is that's just not how it happens. This is a wallet. For most DAF donors, This is a wallet that they make gifts out of, and they are making the majority of their gifts based on what inspires them and they are interested in. So it's the same strategy in terms of reaching those donors. It's the same as any other type of fundraising. Where the differentiation or the alpha comes in is for those donors you're bringing in, how do you make sure that they're using their DAF and that it's as easy as possible?
Yeah. If you're going to invest the time to forge relationships with DAFs for community-based organizations like the ones we work with, I think where I can see value in doing that is purely because you're now interested in educating your donors on DAFs, because many of them still probably don't know what it is, and help them, like, guide them in that direction and make it part of your donor strategy. And that might be a reason to do it, but I wouldn't spend any time doing business development with them to try to get them to put you at the top of the list, because there's too many out there.
Yeah, it's you and 100,000 others, right?
Man, so it's going to be a big list.
The one place where I do think you can get a more bang for your buck, especially community-based organization, is with local community foundation. So because there's typically not just staff giving on the table. So if you are applying for a grant, like an open grant that is listed and has an application from the community foundation, that program officer who's reviewing your application is the same one that gets tapped to meet with their DAF fund holders when they have questions about that cause area locally. And so that is a practical instance where there is someone at the donor advised fund who might be able to say, oh, you're interested in infant and maternal health locally. Here's 4 organizations I know about that are working in that area that you can check out. And you might get that original grant too that you applied for. So good use of time. It's targeted and specific to your organization. And that's a way community foundations function, because their offering in general, their offering to fund holders is higher touch. We're a source of expertise locally. And there are fund holders of theirs that do seek out that expertise, and that it is helpful to have a relationship with the relevant program officer who manages those kinds of grant cycles for your cause area.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice. I think it's all well said, man. We could do this for probably another hour, but I want to be respectful of your time. I want to kind of wrap this up with a couple of fun questions if you're up for it. And then I'm going to add offline too. So I'm going to follow. All right. If you got $1 million in a DAF, what cause gets it today for you?
Oh man, it's an easy answer, but I'm on the board at a nonprofit. I've been there for coming up on 8 years on their board at the LGBT Center here in New York City. They've had some specific programs that have had federal funding cut, particularly around HIV and AIDS services, which is a huge passion area of mine. I lost an uncle to AIDS earlier in my life. And so, yeah, if I had $1 million, I could backfill definitely one of those programs for them. And that's where I'd be making my gift.
I love it. Okay. Question number 2. What's a common best practice that you hear in nonprofit fundraising that's actually terrible advice?
I hit on one of these earlier with the just become friends with the DAF.
If you want.
I want to think of another one. I think that the biggest thing, again, in my expertise area, when it comes to DAF fundraising, is often people think, oh, that was their big gift, so we shouldn't bother them anymore. Or we don't want to over communicate with DAF donors, or the biggest one, DAF donors are male donors, and NAIL, that they are male responsive donors because they skew older. And so, yes, they may respond more to mail items, but almost 100% of those people are logging onto a computer to submit the pitched grant request in their DAF portal. So I would completely flip that on its head and say that DAF donors are actually digital first donors. They have to be on their computer to submit a gift. And so they may be mail responsive, but don't leave them out of any other type of campaign. We've seen some awesome stories around SMS communications related to DAF gifts. Even within DAF Pay, over a third of donations are made on mobile. That's brand new behavior for DAF donors. So don't count them out and don't just think that they're like old mail responsive.
Yeah, that's where I was going earlier with the interest in DAF. I do think digital first donors, like I'm looking for a place where I can organize that part of my life that makes it as easy as possible for me to give. And that sounds, I don't have a DAF, but I'm actually now inspired by this discussion to go think about that's the place me and my family do the thing. And the better the technology and the easier it is for me to do that, checks all my boxes. I don't open mail though, so don't send me any mail. I usually just shred. Okay, last one. If you have one, the worst fundraising ask you've ever witnessed. Something that was just brutal.
I made a gift on the first DAF day, October 10th, 2024, to a nonprofit. I got a mailed thank you letter for that gift, even though I provided my email, a full calendar year later.
Calendar year later. Oh no.
So I don't know if
It might have been the last time. Maybe you're just such a nice person you gave again, but that stuff sticks with people.
yeah, it just spoke volumes to the opportunities that are out there. So I don't know. That wasn't a specific fundraising ask,
It's
but
still a good story and a relevance.
definitely something that stuck with me for sure.
All right. Mitch, thank you for just dropping some serious DAF knowledge on us. Very grateful that you were willing to join the podcast. I learned a ton. I hope everybody that's listening learned a ton. Before we go, where can folks find you and where can they learn more about Chariot and the work you do?
Yeah, of course. So I'm very loud on LinkedIn. So you can definitely follow me there or reach out if you have questions. I spend too much time there, but I do love it. And Chariot, also, you can follow on LinkedIn. You can follow us on YouTube. We've been putting out a lot of helpful content there on a lot of different aspects, particularly around the gift processing piece we talked about today. And go check out our website is givechariot.com and let us know how we can help.
Very cool, man. Again, thank you for joining today, Mitch. Hope everybody enjoyed the show and we'll see y'all later.
Thank you.